Does everybody understand what I just did? I found a commonality that was unique to my reactant, the carbon, and I found that in the product. And I knew the only way to make that product was to use that reactant. Okay? Because the carbon's not going to magically appear out of anywhere. It has to come from that glucose. Which means, by the powers of deduction again, if the energy is being generated simply by the transfer of these electrons, the energy is a moot point. We don't have to worry about it. So my oxygen then is going to be used to make what? Water. Good. Okay, now, using the altered form of my definitions, that it doesn't necessarily just have to be electrons, it can also be hydrogen atoms. Which of those two reactants, glucose or oxygen, is being reduced? Oxygen. Does everybody see why? Reduction is gain of electrons or hydrogens. It's just oxygen here. Here, it's now water. It has gained hydrogen. So it is being reduced. Okay, what about my glucose? It's oxidized, right? It's losing hydrogens. Notice it's C6H12O6. Over here, it's just carbon dioxide. Okay, so it is being oxidized. Questions, concerns over this? I can guarantee you there will be redox reactions on the exam. So if you have any questions right now, please ask. Okay, Allison first and Kate.
Okay, so I'm just trying to understand. Okay, so it's oxidized because we have the glucose molecule, whatever, and then you see that there's carbon in there. And then the other one that has carbon there, you have to have that in your glucose. So that's why it's oxidized?
It's not, that's not the reason it's oxidized. What I was trying to show you initially was how to trace from reactant to product where the glucose or the carbons in that glucose went. In other words, you can't just create carbons in the middle of the process. Right. Remember, all chemical reactions start with the same number of reactants and end with the same number of products, right? In regards to the atoms that make up those reactants and products. So with the sodium chloride, it was very easy to see that the sodium atom was going to become the sodium ion because they're the exact same atom, right? It's just that one lost an electron and became the other. With this, though, we're no longer staying with glucose, okay? The carbon in this glucose is being released through this process as carbon dioxide. The reason why I showed you this and I spent so much time talking about the carbon is that some students, before I draw these arrows, see this equation and they have no idea which reactant becomes which product or which reactant is used to technically generate which product. And a lot of students think that the oxygen we inhale somehow magically becomes carbon dioxide when we exhale. What you can actually see in this particular drawing, where is all the carbon dioxide coming from that we exhale? Glucose. Glucose. As we break down glucose, that's when we're releasing carbon dioxide. The oxygen that we actually breathe in, it eventually is converted to water. Okay?
So glucose is being oxidized and oxygen is reduced?
Yes. Now, to answer your question further, Allison, the reason why glucose is being oxidized is because it is losing electrons or hydrogen atoms throughout the course of this reaction. Notice it has carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen initially. Over here, it only has carbon and oxygen. It lost those hydrogens. Katie?
Couldn't you just look at what you just did and be able to tell which one that needs to without being like the glucose needs to be the, I don't know how that phrase is.
You can. Sometimes it gets a little confusing though. This is a really clear-cut example because we've got carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. But what if I had hydrogen peroxide and water generating some kind of products? Okay? That can be a little trickier. This is very clear-cut and straightforward. But more importantly, what I'm trying to do with this is not trip y'all up so much as show you the technique you should approach every single chemical equation with. So you can then say, okay, this is what's being reduced, this is what's being oxidized. Does that? Okay, we'll do another one. Okay, hang on. I have to remember one off the top of my head, so bear with me here.
Leave the out of pocket. Leave the out of pocket. Did you find out the pocket? Maybe that's enough.
Okay, so here's my new equation where I've got ethane plus oxygen, and I'm burning that ethane, forming carbon dioxide and water. So similar to what we're doing here with glucose. Okay? Now I could also reverse this equation if I really wanted to. And I could have 4 carbon dioxides plus 6 waters. Then I'm eventually converting into 2 molecules of ethane and 5 molecules of oxygen gas. And now drawing it backwards is important because we're going to see something really cool happen here. Okay? So I'm going to erase the respiration equation real quick and then I'll get to your question, Richard. Has everybody gotten the respiration equation at this point?
Well, I was going to ask a question about it.
Okay, go ahead.
You were saying that the oxygen is reduced
Yes.
by the hydrogen. Would it be also correct to say that the hydrogen is being oxidized?
It's not that the hydrogen is being oxidized, the glucose is being oxidized. The hydrogen atoms represent electrons in this particular instance. Okay? Because the hydrogens represent electrons, they're not actually being reduced or oxidized. They're actively what is reducing one of the 2 reactants and results in the oxidation of the other. Okay? Now, as soon as we kind of get this down, I'm going to introduce 2 more terms that will make this even more fun-filled for you, called the oxidizing agent and the reducing agent. And they're going to be the exact opposite, most likely, of what most of you think of. So, first and foremost, let's go ahead and start with this equation here.